The 1960s saw an unparalleled explosion of creative bands coming out of the UK who created a lasting and historic legacy. British bands ruled the world, and to use a North American expression, the British invasion was a real thing. Now, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones and The Who were undoubtedly at the forefront creatively and commercially of this movement. But this wasn't just a trio, it was a quartet, and the fourth member of this band of bands was the Kinks. Welcome to this video, by the way. Thanks for watching. And if you like this, please subscribe and click the like button. I appreciate it. Now, there's no way a humble chap like me could do justice to the full history and impact of the Kinks in one little video, so I'm not even going to try. Instead, I'd like to talk about one of my all-time favourite albums by any artist from what I would call the second golden era of the Kinks, 1979's Low Budget, an album I believe deserves much more love over 40 years on. An underlooked album, as it were. The Kinks were formed in London's Muswell Hill in 1963 by brothers Ray and Dave Davies, along with drummer Mick Avory and bassist Pete Quaife. Now, Ray was and is one of the greatest songwriters in popular music history, and Dave is the template for all rock guitar heroes everywhere. In 1964, they invented riff-driven hard rock with the timeless classic You Really Got Me. It's debatable, but to me, heavy metal, garage and punk may never have sounded like they did without this seminal track. Throughout the 1960s, they continued to produce classic after classic, such as Till the End of the Day, See My Friend, Tired of Waiting for You, Sunny Afternoon, Lola, and my personal favourite, the sublime Waterloo Sunset. So the list goes on and on and on, and I could make a 12-hour live video talking about in each and every amazing song. And hey, who knows, one day I might. Now, by the early 1970s, the band had moved on to concept albums full of very diverse musical styles, which gained a lot of critical acclaim but saw decreased commercial success. And as the 1970s progressed, they started to return to a more hard rock style, and this saw an uptick of interest, particularly in the United States, for the band. This transition to a more radio-friendly arena rock sound and arena-filling concerts saw them hit a second peak of success, hence my use of the second golden era term. And the epitome of this for me was the album I want to talk about today, Low Budget. Low Budget was recorded mainly at New York's Power Station and released on a new label for them, Arista. The core of the band were the core original members, Ray, who wrote and sang all the songs, played guitar and keyboards, and produced the album. You had Dave on lead guitar, and Mick Avory was still in the band as the drummer at this time. And augmenting them in place of Pete Quaife was a 1978 addition on bass, Jim Rodford. Now, incidentally, for those who've got a few minutes, Jim Rodford had an interesting rock history himself. If you look him up, being a big part of bands such as the Zombies and Argent, who made some exceptionally great records in their day. Lyrically, the album eschewed the more esoteric material of the concept albums for a more topical feel, and looking at the lyrics today, much of them are still very relevant, even 40 years on. Excuse me. Now, with much of the world at the time in the late 70s in the midst of economic depression, strikes, social conflict, there were tales on the album of cash woes, of American sorrow over fickle allies in its time of need, the pressures of modern living and conforming to that, the emotional alienation that society was increasingly encouraging, societal conflict, the price of gas, the negative impact of miserable, joyless people. Almost a great topic for Ray. And Ray's usual philosophical musings on the nature of life. So, in fact, to me, the lyrics on this album are some of the best on any rock album ever. I really think Ray did a magnificent job with these songs. But of course, it wasn't just about the lyrics, it was about the music too, and this was coupled with some of Dave's dirtiest and heaviest riffs and a muscular rhythm section. So, not being able to play the music on this video, I would urge you to go to the Kinks official YouTube site where all of the tracks are available there to hear for free, but I would also urge you to buy a copy of this LP, preferably on vinyl, and it has a fabulous cover. To me, it's a great cover with the red shoes and the feet and the dirty sidewalk and the cigarette butts lying there. I think it's a typical downbeat, realistic, gritty cover, but in a stylistic way. If that makes any sense. Probably doesn't. Yeah, if you can't buy a copy in vinyl, get a copy in digital. You will not regret it. And listen to each track and then come back and listen to the rest of this video again. So side one kicks off with the punky Attitude. Now, some older bands just made themselves sound silly trying to punk it up, but not the Kinks, who were punks long before it had a name. And you only have to listen to some of the things like You Really Got Me and All Day All of the Night. They were punking it up. Hey, long before it even had such a name. But even within the punky riffing of the song, the melody still comes out in the chorus. I'm going to leave all these verbal ticks in, by the way, because I don't do the editing thing. Then, one of the cornerstones of the album was track 2 and side 1, Catch Me, Now I'm Falling. And a kind of a honky-tonk womanish riff encompasses a point of view tale of a puzzled America, referred to as Captain America, one of 2 comic hero references on the record, pleading with its fair weather allies not to desert it in its hour of economic need. An interesting record, as it was written by a British guy who grew up in the aftermath of World War II and things like the Marshall Plan. And there's a great hook in this song, which leads into the repeated title chorus. It's crisp and compelling, as one review at the time correctly put it. Lovely track. Next track, Pressure, is kind of like punk rock meets the Beach Boys, with a shoutable hook designed for live audiences and some fantastic bass playing. Really rocks along. Much of this album was clearly crafted by Ray to work in that arena rock setting that the band were moving into, with maximum opportunity for the crowd to sing and clap along. Now, the following track, National Health, isn't so much about Britain's sacred cow, the National Health Service, but more of a statement on the frayed nerves of modern humans in the nation, and the pursuits they employ to escape those pressures. I love the opening couplet. Nervous tension, man's invention, is the biggest killer that's around today. Just great lines that Ray writes. There are some funky electronic keyboard sounds going on too, which adds to the ambience, and some scratchy new wave guitar from Dave. Now, the final track on side 1 is another masterpiece, and the second comic hero reference in the song Wish I Could Fly Like Superman. Basically, it's about a 9-stone weakling seeking escape from reality by dreaming of flying like the Man of Steel, as we all do from time to time, I suspect. An insanely catchy guitar riff, funky bass, brilliant chorus, and a relentless, almost disco beat makes this song a total joy, and I could listen to it a million times. One of the Kinks' best ever recordings, in my opinion. So at this point, all vinyl lovers would switch the record over to the other side. And side 2, Kinks Off I've written here, but it's Kicks Off in Majestic Style. Perhaps Kinks Off works better. In Majestic Style with the title track Low Budget, also one of the greatest Kinks songs ever. So if Dave's dirty, dirty intro riff doesn't grab you, then I suspect you are clinically dead. It's got a genius level lyric exploring the joys and pains of living in a bargain basement economy, which to me this song is as relevant today as it was then, given the state of current economies. Again, a killer opening couplet. Cheap is cheap and not too steep, but best of all, cheap is cheap. And it only gets better from there. It's an absolute rock-hard track with some of Dave's best guitar work ever and another shout-along chorus for live use. Now moving on, if you close your eyes, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the next track, In a Space, was actually the Rolling Stones circa Some Girls era. Very Stonesy guitar sound leading into it. But this, to me, shows that the Kinks were as proud of their bluesy roots just as much as their fellow Londoners. So this bluesy guitar builds into a smouldering meditation on the individual's place in the universe, with some ferocious guitar work and thundering verses. I love it. It's just fantastic stuff. Following on from that, though, is a little bit of Emotion, which is one of the few, perhaps the only gentle acoustic track on the album. It's a callback to earlier Kinks material, particularly like Celluloid Heroes, another one of my favourite Kinks songs. It's a beautiful meditation on how disconnected people can become from each other. Lovely track. It's kind of back to the rock later, though, with the next track, A Gallon of Gas, and it's a dirty, bluesy, riff-laden rocker, with Dave laying down some hot licks, while Ray complains about how gas costs more than drugs. Again, extremely relevant to today's situation. It could have been written today, it's so on the nose. I just love the blues chops the band show in this one, and Ray's vocal is exceptionally strong, and great backing vocals too, as there are throughout the album. You know, like the other members of that British rock band quartet we mentioned earlier, the Kinks too understood the value of great backing vocals and worked really hard on those. Moving on to the next, the penultimate track on the album, Misery. It opens with yet another brilliant Dave riff, and then this turns into a rollicking barrelhouse rocker with some great piano work by Ray. And Dave does a fantastic Chuck Berry style solo in this one. It's especially clear to me listening to this today on headphones. It's how fantastic Ray's production is as well. It's clear and crisp, but very punchy. And this is possibly the most underestimated track on the album, Misery. It's got a joyful sound, which is completely at odds with the lyric, which is about someone who's an absolute pain in the arse. And I've kind of always wondered who Ray was singing about. And the final track, Moving Pictures, closes the album out on a more hopeful, if resigned tone. And it's a funky song with a rock-solid beat again from Mick and some quirky riffs, including a lot of electronics swirling in the background. It's as catchy as hell and as uplifting as anything could sound. A beautiful addition to the Kinks canon. So there it is. For me, this was a landmark Kinks album, proving they were as relevant moving into the 1980s as they were in 1964. It's certainly one of the greatest albums of the 1970s, and it's one of my top 10 albums of all time. It did give them a number 11 hit on the US album charts, and it set the stage for a massively successful world tour, which gave me the opportunity to see them live for the first time ever. It was a great experience, and I've been lucky enough to see them multiple times since, while they were still playing through the 80s and 90s. And I've seen Ray Davies solo a few times as well, and I always had the best time. The back catalogue that Ray and Kinks have got is just so phenomenal. You just come away absolutely loving every performance. Well, thank you again for listening. I will be back very soon with a couple of other Kinks vinyl curiosities, 7-inch vinyl curiosities from my collection. But until then, keep on rocking.